You won't believe what just happened inside the courtroom. Mark Kelly, usually calm and composed, exploded in a moment that left even the judge stunned. What triggered his outburst, and how did it shift the entire debate in just minutes? Stick around. This is one of the most intense political moments you'll see this year. And the full story will leave you questioning everything about authority, leadership, and public pressure. The tension in the courtroom was palpable the moment Mark Kelly entered. The retired astronaut turned senator was no stranger to high-pressure situations. But today's proceedings carried a weight unlike any he had faced before. The court-martial had become more than a legal battle. It was a stage for national attention, a test of his credibility, and an intense spotlight on the Navy's internal discipline system. Cameras lined the back of the courtroom, capturing every micro-expression, every whispered remark, every subtle shift in posture. The stakes were high, and Kelly knew it as the judge began to outline the initial findings. A wave of disbelief crossed Kelly's face. The arguments he had prepared meticulously for months seemed to be crumbling before him. His team had presented evidence, expert testimonies, and detailed accounts. But the judge's interpretation of procedural missteps and technical violations left him frustrated. The courtroom's silence was deafening, punctuated only by the scribble of notes and the occasional shuffle of papers. Kelly's jaw tightened. His hands clutched the edge of the table. It was in that moment of tension that the judge delivered a statement that Kelly could not accept. The verdict, as it was phrased, seemed to diminish not only the extensive service and dedication he had shown, but also the meticulous preparation of his defense team. The room felt like it shrank. Every word weighed like lead. Kelly's internal calculation rasped. How could he respond without undermining his professional standing? How could he maintain the decorum expected of someone of his rank while the pressure of the moment threatened to overpower him? Then it happened. The first flare of anger broke through. Kelly's voice, usually calm and measured, rose sharply. "With all due respect, Your Honor, this ruling completely overlooks the documented evidence and ignores the sworn testimonies that have been presented." The words echoed, bouncing off the walls of the historic courtroom. Eyes turned. Whispers spread like wildfire. People who had expected a restrained reaction were now witnessing an unfiltered, human display of frustration and conviction. The judge attempted to interject, citing courtroom protocol, but Kelly, fueled by a combination of disbelief and principle, pressed forward. Every point he had rehearsed was delivered with a force that blurred the line between professional critique and personal outrage. He highlighted procedural inconsistencies, questioned interpretations, and meticulously dissected the flaws in the ruling. His tone was sharp, precise, and undeniably passionate. It was a moment of raw authenticity, a public figure letting the world see the intensity of their conviction. Meanwhile, the gallery of observers, both in person and through live broadcasts, absorbed every detail. Social media began buzzing instantly as clips of Kelly's outburst began circulating. Analysts dissected his approach, debating whether this was a tactical move or a moment of unfiltered human reaction. For many, the sheer intensity of his response was mesmerizing. For others, it was controversial, a deviation from the expected senatorial decorum. But regardless of opinion, no one could deny the spectacle. By the midpoint of the hearing, it was clear that Kelly had set a new tone. The courtroom was no longer just a site of legal procedure, had become a battleground of conviction versus protocol, of emotion versus regulation. His voice carried weight, his arguments demanded attention, and even those predisposed to agree with the ruling had to pause and reconsider. The combination of evidence, moral clarity, and controlled intensity forced the room to confront the ruling from multiple angles. Simultaneously, Kelly's approach was not just about anger. It was a carefully orchestrated strategy that balanced indignation with rational argumentation. Each point was layered, each assertion supported by documentation. and each challenge framed to expose gaps in the court's analysis. Observers remarked on how Kelly's training as an astronaut seemed to manifest in his focus under immense pressure. He remained laser-focused on the facts, despite the emotional surge that threatened to dominate the room by the end of this first hour. The courtroom atmosphere had transformed. Journalists scribbled notes furiously. Cameras zoomed in on every reaction, and the public, glued to live streams, debated fervently online. Kelly's voice, though initially raised in frustration, had become the instrument of a larger narrative, one of accountability, fairness, and unflinching dedication to truth. Whether the judge would reconsider or whether appeals would be triggered. The first act of this courtroom drama had already gone viral in the hearts and minds of viewers across the nation. The courtroom was still thick with tension when the judge's gavel barely came down before Mark Kelly's frustration erupted. The loss was official, but Kelly's reaction wasn't just about disappointment. It was a calculated display of emotion, a mix of indignation and disbelief that drew the eyes of every spectator, lawyer, and reporter present. Cameras caught the moment in perfect clarity, every micro-expression amplified, every sigh and shake of the head feeding into a narrative that would immediately spread. Across social media and news outlets, Kelly's team had known the decision was close. But the margin, delivered in such a public setting, sparked a wave of visible anger. His body language leaning forward, hands slamming on the desk. A voice rising above the murmurs created an image that no clip editor could resist. Analysts would later describe this as a textbook example of emotional projection in high-stakes political arenas. And commentators immediately began parsing the implications. Was Kelly showing weakness? Or was this an intentional tactic to signal strength and resistance to his opponents? The judge, maintaining an air of stoicism, had anticipated some reaction, but seemed momentarily unprepared for the intensity. Each comment from Kelly was sharp, sometimes overlapping with legal procedural language, demonstrating that his knowledge of the courtroom rules was not compromised even by his fury. "This is an outright injustice," he exclaimed, his voice cutting through the usual decorum expected in such chambers. The facts clearly support a different conclusion. Spectators and reporters scribbled furiously, noting not just the content of his statements, but also the delivery. Every pause, emphasis, and glance toward the opposing counsel was calculated. Clips of the exchange immediately began trending on Twitter and TikTok, with hashtags like #KellyCourtroomOutburst, #SupremeAnger, and #CourtMartialChaos dominating feeds. News anchors replayed the 15-second soundbite dozens of times, dissecting his tone, intent, and possible future strategies. Meanwhile, lawyers and political analysts offered their insights. Some argued that Kelly's outburst could backfire, portraying him as unable to control his temper in high-pressure situations. Others suggested it was a masterstroke, a strategic display designed to rally supporters who might see the legal system as unjust or biased. Social media was flooded with clips showing both perspectives, creating heated debates about the limits of decorum versus the power of passion in public life. Back in the courtroom, the tension did not dissipate. Kelly's colleagues attempted to interject, but he waved them off, insisting on his narrative. "I've studied these proceedings extensively," he stated, and the ruling ignores key points that were clearly presented. His insistence on accuracy combined with emotion highlighted a rare intersection of technical knowledge and raw human reaction, captivating both the media and the public as the minutes ticked by. It became clear that this moment would define the courtroom drama for days, if not weeks. Editors began compiling highlight reels showing Kelly's expressions, each meme and reaction clip amplifying the viral effect. Even pundits who normally remained neutral found themselves commenting. Unable to ignore the theatrical yet genuine display of emotion, analysts noted that the viral nature of this exchange was enhanced by the contrast between Kelly's intensity and the judge's composed demeanor. The split-screen shots used by news outlets made the emotional disparity stark, turning what could have been a routine legal announcement into a spectacle that dominated social feeds, cable news, and commentary podcasts simultaneously. Meanwhile, inside the courtroom, whispers spread among staff and spectators. The unexpected fervor from Kelly seemed to unsettle not just the legal team, but even some members of the press. Microphones picked up gasps and murmurs, all captured in clips that would circulate widely, further cementing the moment as a defining political legal spectacle. From a strategic perspective, Kelly's team later argued that while the courtroom loss was tangible, the emotional display could energize public perception, drawing attention to his positions, frustrations, and determination. Social media debates continued to fuel this narrative. Some viewers applauded his courage, others criticized the decorum. But no one could deny that the moment left a lasting impression as the judge finally called for order. Kelly's breathing was heavy, hands clenched, eyes sharp. The room's energy crackled, the tension thick enough to be felt through screens worldwide. The clips from this courtroom showdown were immediately compiled into compilations, with commentary highlighting the intensity, implications, and potential ripple effects of such a public display from a high-profile political figure. By the time the cameras were powered down, the viral impact had already taken root. Tweets, news segments, and online debates proliferated with comments analyzing every nuance, from Kelly's choice of words to his facial expressions and gestures. This wasn't just a courtroom moment. It had transcended into a public phenomenon, a demonstration of how personal conviction, emotion, and political stakes intersect in ways that capture global attention almost instantaneously, even outside the legal sphere. The outburst became a talking point. Political commentators referenced it in context of leadership, accountability, and the pressures faced by public figures. Social media polls and threads exploded with opinions, memes, and analyses. Every detail from Kelly's vocal inflection to his posture became a point of conversation. This powerful display underlined the complexity of modern political communication, where the visual and emotional components of a message often carry as much weight as the legal or factual content. Mark Kelly's courtroom eruption wasn't merely a loss. It was a viral, dissectable, an unforgettable political moment that will be discussed, analyzed, and referenced across platforms for months to come. Tensions escalated as the courtroom settled into an uneasy silence, every eye fixed on the unfolding confrontation. Mark Kelly's frustration had clearly reached its peak, his face flushed and hands trembling slightly as he tried to contain the torrent of emotion building inside him. The judge's words, crisp and unyielding, had just finalized a ruling that Kelly had anticipated but never fully prepared to accept. It wasn't merely a professional loss. It carried weighty personal implications, reverberating through his public image and political credibility. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras clicked, and whispers rippled through the gallery, sensing the intensity of a moment that could define the narrative for weeks to come. Kelly's voice, sharp yet controlled at first, began to rise as he responded to the judge's ruling. The legal jargon he had rehearsed in preparation now colliding with raw emotion. The contrast between his normally composed public persona and the fervor he displayed here was striking, leaving everyone in the room momentarily stunned. Political analysts watching live feeds immediately started predicting how this moment could be weaponized, dissected for sound bites, and used to either bolster or undermine his credibility in the months ahead. His colleagues, advisors, and legal team exchanged concerned glances, realizing that the courtroom exchange had just moved from a matter of legal procedure into a spectacle that would dominate headlines and social media timelines alike. As Kelly paced slightly, he punctuated each sentence with gestures that betrayed a mixture of exasperation and disbelief. "I can't believe this ruling," he said, voice cracking at the edges after everything we presented. The evidence, the testimonies, it's as if none of it even mattered. The judge remained stoic, eyes unwavering, maintaining the decorum of the courtroom while allowing Kelly's words to echo through the space. Observers noted that the intensity of the moment lay not in any physical confrontation, but in the sheer power of words and the emotional gravitas Kelly brought to the room. Each statement he made carried implications far beyond the immediate case, touching on leadership, accountability, and the pressures of public service in high-stakes arenas. Social media, already primed for breaking news, erupted almost immediately. Clips of Kelly's outburst circulated within minutes, accompanied by hashtags ranging from #MarkKellyRage to #CourtroomDrama. Political commentators analyzed every inflection, every gesture, speculating about what this meant for Kelly's standing among constituents and peers. Some framed it as a humanizing glimpse into the strain leaders endure under scrutiny, while others portrayed it as a loss of composure unbecoming of someone in his position. The viral nature of the moment was unmistakable. Viewers couldn't look away from the combination of legal tension, raw emotion, and political stakes all colliding in a single scene. Meanwhile, in the courtroom, Kelly's legal team worked frantically to reassert control, attempting to redirect the narrative back to procedural and evidentiary matters. However, the energy in the room had already shifted. Witnesses and onlookers were acutely aware that history was being made not just by the verdict, but by the reactions it provoked. Kelly's insistence on pressing every point, challenging the nuances of the ruling, and vocalizing his disagreement created a dynamic where the courtroom itself became a stage for political theater. Observers later noted that his ability to articulate both frustration and rationale in real time would likely be dissected in law schools, media studies, and political strategy classes for years to come. Despite the intensity, Kelly demonstrated moments of strategic calculation amid the emotional surge. Each statement, though fueled by genuine indignation, was carefully crafted to highlight perceived inconsistencies and procedural oversights without overtly violating decorum. This balancing act, a fusion of passion and tactical awareness, captured the attention of political strategists and media analysts alike. They recognized that while a public outburst can be risky, if framed correctly, it can shift public sympathy, galvanize supporters, and even influence ongoing political narratives surrounding leadership, credibility, and accountability. As the exchange continued, journalists covering the live proceedings emphasized the contrast between the rigidity of the legal process and the human element Kelly brought into the room. Micro-expressions, pauses, and subtle shifts in tone became subjects of scrutiny. Experts on political communication noted that Kelly's performance, even in a moment of visible frustration, demonstrated an acute awareness of public perception. He was broadcasting both to the courtroom and millions of viewers watching through screens, fully aware that every word could shape the story that emerged afterward by the time the hearing adjourned. The energy in the room had shifted dramatically. Kelly's frustration was palpable, yet it was tempered by a realization that his actions had already left a mark. Analysts speculated how this moment would resonate beyond the immediate legal context, potentially influencing legislation, public opinion, and Kelly's broader political positioning. Clips from the courtroom rapidly became reference points for discussions on leadership under pressure, the emotional dimensions of legal disputes, and the high stakes inherent to political life. Even as the courtroom emptied, the resonance of the exchange lingered like an electric charge, impossible to ignore. Every journalist, every advisor, every onlooker was still processing what had just unfolded. Mark Kelly's eruption was not just a personal reaction, but a moment that exposed the intricate tension between legal authority and human emotion. The judge, maintaining the decorum expected of the Supreme Court, quietly returned to chambers, But the ripple effect of the confrontation was only beginning. Video clips were already trending online, memes were emerging, and political forums were dissecting every syllable of Kelly's impassioned statements. This wasn't just about a legal loss anymore. It had transformed into a political spectacle with implications far beyond the walls of the courtroom. Kelly's advisors quickly convened to assess damage control. Yet they knew the challenge was unique. The public's fascination had already taken a life of its own. Tweets highlighting his frustration surged, some sympathetic, some critical, but all acknowledging the raw intensity of the moment. Meanwhile, pundits debated whether this outburst would humanize Kelly in the eyes of his supporters, or whether it would create the perception of volatility that could haunt him politically. Each replay of the courtroom exchange served as both evidence of his passion and a case study in the delicate art of balancing authority with emotion on a public stage. Inside the legal chambers, whispers circulated about the unprecedented nature of Kelly's response. Colleagues and legal experts noted that while the law demands adherence to procedural rigor, Kelly had brought an undeniable energy that forced even the judge to pause briefly, recognizing the intensity of his challenge. Observers highlighted that Kelly's approach vehement but articulate, emotional yet reasoned, offered a blueprint for navigating high stakes. Moments where the stakes are as much about perception as they are about facts. Every gesture, every inflection, every carefully timed pause contributed to a performance that captivated a national audience while maintaining a thread of strategic purpose beneath the visible. Frustration, the courtroom's microcosm, reflected a broader national narrative, the intersection of leadership, accountability, and the high-pressure scrutiny that public figures endure. Kelly's voice, raised but calculated, resonated with those who saw in it a leader unwilling to accept decisions without question, while also revealing the human strain behind public service. Analysts emphasize that moments like these often become defining chapters in political iconographies, not just for the individual at the center, but for the public's understanding of how law, emotion, and leadership intersect in real time. Outside, media outlets raced to interpret every angle. Headlines varied, but the overarching theme was clear. A moment of dramatic intensity had occurred, and it was impossible to ignore. Social media amplified the discourse, creating a digital echo chamber where millions could simultaneously experience, analyze, and debate the courtroom drama. Commentary threads dissected Kelly's rhetorical strategies, from his rapid-fire articulation of grievances to the controlled pauses that punctuated his points. The incident became a case study in crisis management, political optics, and the unpredictable nature of public attention in the digital age. Amid the chaos, Kelly demonstrated a subtle recalibration of tone. While his initial outburst had conveyed frustration and disbelief, he gradually shifted toward a more reflective articulation of key issues, reinforcing the legitimacy of his arguments. This pivot illustrated an acute understanding of narrative control. He allowed the emotional surge to capture attention, but tempered it with strategic clarity, ensuring the core points, legal inconsistencies, procedural concerns, and broader implications for governance remained central. The duality of raw emotion and strategic communication transformed the courtroom moment into a masterclass in high-stakes messaging under pressure. As the day progressed, experts highlighted the broader impact on political discourse. Kelly's confrontation had become a touchstone for discussions on accountability, leadership under scrutiny, and the interplay between personal conviction and institutional authority. Political analysts speculated how this moment would influence voter perceptions, legislative negotiations, and future public appearances. Every nuance from Kelly's tone to his body language was now being archived, analyzed, and referenced in debates, podcasts, and editorial columns. The courtroom had become a stage where law, politics and media collided, leaving an indelible mark on public consciousness by evening. The full magnitude of the moment was clear. Mark Kelly's response had transcended the confines of the courtroom. It had become a viral reference point, a lesson in handling adversity under scrutiny, and a demonstration of how emotion and strategy can coexist in the most high-pressure settings. Analysts agreed that while the legal outcome was fixed, the political reverberations were just beginning. Kelly's voice, loud, unflinching, and articulate, had reshaped the narrative, challenging conventional expectations about public conduct, authority, and accountability, even long after the cameras stopped rolling. The impact of his confrontation continued to unfold. Discussions proliferated online and offline, dissecting every statement and gesture. Scholars, strategists, and citizens alike debated the implications, from leadership perception to legal precedent. It became a moment of national conversation, a testament to how a single individual's forthrightness could ignite dialogue, influence opinion, and reshape public understanding. The courtroom had witnessed not only a legal challenge, but a defining political and media moment that would linger in the collective consciousness, demonstrating the enduring power of a measured yet impassioned public voice.